The WWE, or once WWF, or once WWF, has been around for so many years, there are plenty of misconceptions. Some of them are actually conceptions, if that makes any sense, but you know the deal, especially with the rise of social media. Sometimes somebody will say something, and then that just becomes the truth. That's kind of how wrestling works anyway. Kevin Nash once said that the only true thing about wrestling is the money and the miles. There's definitely something to that. And it's just always going to be baggage that the sports entertainment business has, because again, you're always trying to pull the wool over somebody's eyes. But today we are going to go through a few of these and try and work out the fact from the fiction. So I am Simon Miller. I'm really bald. Let's go. Number 11, the failure of a WWE-owned WCW was the fault of WCW. So maybe that doesn't describe what we're going to talk about the best way, but we all know that when eventually the WWE, the then WWF, bought World Championship Wrestling, everybody got pumped because we thought we were about to get a bunch of dream matches. Instead, we got the invasion angle, and I think it's fair to say it didn't really work out like we had hoped. I mean, let's not forget that Stone Cold Steve Austin and Kurt Angle were on Team Alliance at one point, and then there was that SummerSlam 2001 match when The Undertaker and Kane took on Diamond Dallas Page and Chris Kanyon. I mean, if you look up the word humiliation in the wrestling dictionary, you're probably going to see this: the Brothers of Destruction killed him. Now, of course, Vince McMahon was over the moon to finally purchase his competition. You can see it on that simulcast episode of Nitro/Raw. But ultimately, he didn't really need the company at this point, because in March 2001, the WWF Attitude Era was huge. You also had the issue of the fact that every single WCW guy that walked into that locker room had to deal with a sort of war, because for the last 5 years, everybody had learned to distrust WCW, so you ain't just gonna walk into our house and get what you want. Then, of course, none of the actual big stars came across because they wanted to see out their turn of contracts, which makes all the sense in the world. You got to stay at home, rest up, and my gosh, you got a lot of money. So it does kind of mean that even if a Goldberg, a Ric Flair, and a Hulk Hogan had walked back in 2001, maybe this wouldn't have helped anyway, because again, you would have had Steve Austin, The Rock, The Undertaker, all going to the boss and saying, bro, we just helped you kick those guys' ass. They probably shouldn't be pushed how we are, and they definitely don't deserve the same cash. So really, when you do think about it and you put your wrestling head on, this was always going to be a bust. Everybody on every side would have had to have been happy to work together, and ultimately there was just one guy calling the shots. And history is always written by the victors. Why we can't have nice things. But yeah, WWE absolutely did this to itself. And I actually think looking back, they're pretty damn proud of it. But 10 things are different now they're owned by TKO. Now, depending on who you talk to, I'm sure you can find some truth in this. But now we have been under the TKO leadership for a couple of years. Well, everything just kind of feels the same. You could actually argue it's a little bit worse. This actually goes to an interview that happened yesterday as I am talking to you, when the bigwigs of TKO actually admitted they're not happy with ticket prices at the moment, because when Vince McMahon ran WWE, he was all into family prices, whereas TKO would like WWE to match the yield of UFC. You are a fan of MMA and you go to Ultimate Fighting Championship shows, you know how much those seats cost. So if you think WWE is expensive now, hold on to your horses, my friends. Here we go. It's only fair to say that worth always comes down to what somebody is willing to pay for something. So if you do believe that 10 grand for a front row seat at WrestleMania is worth it, then more power to you. The issue is the more we do that, the more the other seats go up, and eventually just price everybody out anyway. Bottom line though is much like Vince McMahon, TKO just want to make money. That's probably why WrestleMania 43 is going to Saudi Arabia. So yeah. WWE is just the same as it always has been, and probably will be this way until one day it dies. But I'll be long gone before that, and when I do pop my clogs, well, I'm sure a front row seat will be 100 grand, and somebody on the internet will be happy about this, because tribalism sucks. There's a different video for a different day. Number 9, Bret Hart vs. Shawn Michaels was a classic WWE rivalry. So actually, if you take all aspects of the Bret Hart-Shawn Michaels story, it is an absolute classic. I know so many people who got into the behind-the-scenes culture because of those two guys. They could not believe they were actually kicking each other's ass in locker rooms and that they didn't like each other. All of a sudden, wrestling was more real than it ever had been. We better keep tuning in. They also had a very similar path in the sense they were both being pushed during a time when WWE was finally focusing on smaller wrestlers. So ultimately, their successes were going to help a lot of other people walk through the WWE door. There is one glaring thing missing from all of this and actually got taken away from us during the Montreal Screwjob: a truly great match between the two. Now, I do think Survivor Series 1997 is their best one, but of course it does get cut short. And when you talk about the WrestleMania 12 Iron match today, well, my gosh, it divides the audience right down the middle. I actually think it's pretty decent, but I also understand those who don't think it's aged that well, mostly because we took a risk and they went nothing for the entire hour. And really, given the stipulation, you need a few falls. That's what makes it so special. And look, most of the matches they did have were pretty damn good. But in terms of that one jewel in the crown that you would tell everybody else, oh man, you gotta see this Bret Shawn match. There was too much shenanigans and there was too much nonsense. And all the conversation devolves into is, maybe we should go and watch the Montreal Screwjob. I am talking to you in September 2025, and I think, like all of us, I'm just a little bit bored of it. So in terms of on-the-screen action, this was taken away from us, but we also know the reason why. It's because backstage, the pair hated each other, and that's why they kept spinning off into their own things. I do think it's important to say that without Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, we probably don't have wrestling as it is today. So they both deserve our undying respect. Number 8, the Attitude Era was one grand plan. So Paul Heyman would be the first guy to tell you that one of the big reasons for the Attitude Era boom is because Vince McMahon looked at what ECW was doing and stole a lot of the ideas. That's most definitely true. But to act like the Attitude Era overall wasn't one of many happy accidents, well, I do think that's a little bit of a misconception. Let's go through some of the major beats, or the King of the Ring 1996, that Steve Austin wasn't even slated to win. The only reason that did go down is because Triple H, who was going to be the victor, got in trouble for the curtain call, so we had to move the cards around. Even after he had become the king, Austin wasn't truly recognized as the guy until Bret Hart returned in October, which was months later, but by that point the Hitman was saying, hey, you know this Steve guy? He's probably the best wrestler in the company. That part was intentional. He was still a heel late in 1996 though, and the babyface turn actually happened in drips and drabs over the next weeks and months, and that's when the WWF started to think to themselves, oh my gosh, we may have something here, we better make a total change. This was also a response to what WCW was doing with the NWO, so I don't want to criticize the WWF too much because it is important you do change with the times, but to act like they had this written down on a piece of paper, well, I think they did. In fact, if you do watch the television today, it really does feel like they do not pull the trigger until they know the rattlesnake is an absolute banker. And you get to WrestleMania 14 and there's no looking back. Suppose you could compare this to Daniel Bryan's rise in 2013 and 2014. The WWE just fought that until they couldn't fight it anymore, and that's when they made the change. And maybe Austin didn't have to struggle that much, but believe you me, he wasn't meant to be the guy. He just got there because he was one of the best of all time. Number 7, Vince McMahon couldn't wait to fire the Ultimate Warrior. So we all remember the infamous self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior DVD, which actually is rather mean. Not saying the Ultimate Warrior didn't bring a lot of this on himself, but it was just so damn spiteful, man. And everybody just went in on the dude. It all came off the fact that when he did leave the WWE in 1996, it was just so controversial. And then when he arrived in WCW in 1998, well, that was terrible. He then went on a speaking tour of college campuses where he was most definitely homophobic and racist. And there's no excuse for that. He shouldn't have done it, and if you were a fan of his and that upsets you, it should do. It was a real letdown. His first exit from the World Wrestling Federation came in 1991 though, and everybody likes to think that Vince McMahon couldn't wait to get rid of the guy, but I don't actually think that's true at all. They did butt heads, so Vince felt like he did have to show him the door. But if we move forward in the timeline, he rang up the Ultimate Warrior and said come back in 1992. He then did it again in 1996. And if you go on the internet right down and do your research, one Jim Hellwig was also offered a monster deal in 1997. That's right, he would have been a part of the Attitude Era. And can you imagine how pissed off Bret Hart would have been? He had to end his 20-year deal because Vince McMahon couldn't afford it, but he loved the Ultimate Warrior so much, he was going to pay him millions of dollars. Now again, 1 year later, he was in World Championship Wrestling and that didn't work out at all, but let's not pretend they fell out and that was the end of the relationship. I think Vince McMahon quite liked the Ultimate Warrior, wanted to make it work. Both guys were just too crazy, which is the story a lot in the world of stupid pro wrestling. Number 6, Hogan Andre and the WrestleMania 3 firsts. Now there is nothing wrong with telling a few white lies when it comes to professional wrestling, even more so when you're trying to promote WrestleMania 3 back in 1987. There's a reason they packed out that dome with that many people. They sold the idea, and everybody wanted to see Hogan versus Andre. Given how much the World Wrestling Federation had exploded by then, there were so many fans who didn't care about what Hulk and Andre had done in their past wrestling lives, nor were they going to go out of their way to find out for themselves. It meant that they could watch this event and just decide, yes, this is the first meeting between the two, and yes, Hulk Hogan has never slammed Andre the Giant before, but then many a documentary was released years after this, and all of that was a pile of baloney. A lot of them were on the WWE Network. Because yes, Hogan and the Giant had wrestled many times before, and every now and then they would actually flip around in terms of heel and babyface. If you are able to find footage of this too, I don't want to be that guy, but you will also see the Hulkster slamming Andre over and over again. So the epic climax of WrestleMania 3, well, it certainly wasn't the debut of that. Furthermore, lots of people, of course, had slammed Andre the Giant throughout his career. Hulk Hogan wasn't doing that for the first time on that night. But doesn't it make a good story? Yes. And of course, if you want to jump in deeper with this, you can find interviews where Hogan exaggerates Andre's weight from 500 pounds to 700 pounds to eventually 1,000 pounds, which is why he had back injuries later in his life. None of that is true whatsoever. Andre the Giant was a professional man. If he wanted to go up, that mother flubber was going up. Number 5, tag team wrestling suffered because of a lack of talent. Now this one is not true at all, and it is Lance Storm who talks about this very eloquently on Wrestling Observer Live alongside Brian Alvarez. The reason tag team wrestling suffered so much in the WWE is because Vince McMahon didn't really like tag team wrestling. Bruce Pritchard on his podcast has confirmed this in the sense that Vince saw it as a dollars and cents thing. He would rather book 2 single stars going against each other because it cost him less. As a businessman, he would make more money. The other issue is that basically during the entire ruthless aggression era, there was no such thing as tag teams, because all we would do is take one single star and put them with another single star and then give them a stupid name. The coolest thing about tag team wrestling is the chemistry between the two individuals, so when it's just random guys pretending they're friends, well, you're never going to buy into that as much as anything else. Those tag team titles were also thrown around like they were candy. I mean, you could just tell that Vince McMahon didn't give a damn. It's why you need to give all the praise to the likes of Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys, the Dudley Boys, and in later years, the Usos and the New Day, who got this all back on track. And why do you think the Revival left the WWE to become FTR and AEW? They care about the division, man. They wanted to be somewhere where they could showcase that as much as possible. So really, if you do want to sum it up as easy as we can, Vince McMahon just couldn't be bothered to pay for tag team wrestling. Look, it was his company. He can do whatever the hell he wants, but for this bored a-hole, I love a bit of tag team action, so it was always a little bit sad to see. Number 4, the WWE Women's Revolution. So I think it is fair to say that the WWE was a bit late of leaving behind the Divas era and allowing women just to be women wrestlers. But if you go back to the Attitude Era, you can find the female performers telling you, we were told we couldn't even hit like the guys, and we essentially just had to do cat fights. Think of all the great talent we would have lost along the way. That really is a silly decision to make. Eventually, the Give Divas a Chance hashtag trended on Twitter, which allowed this to fall into motion, and AJ Lee does deserve a lot of credit for that. She had responded to a Stephanie McMahon tweet about equal women's pay and was all like, well, maybe you could pay us equally too. I mean, we quite literally work for your company. There was also the massive problem that you could have a 3-hour Raw and you would get one women's match that got about 3 minutes. I mean, if you were Michelle McCool, Beth Phoenix, Natalya, AJ Lee, or the Bella Twins, how were you meant to prove you were any good at this when somebody was only giving you 180 seconds? Of course, soon Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks, and Bayley became the 4 horsewomen in NXT and totally changed this. But no, WWE was not the first company to present women like this. I mean, TNA was always doing it very well in the knockouts, and if you jump over to Japan, man, those women have been killing it for decades. So if we are going to be honest with this, the WWE was actually just a little bit behind the curve. It's one of the reasons Ronda Rousey got pushed so hard, because that was one of the catalysts that made Vince McMahon realize women could sell pay-per-views. And yes, that's a really stupid sentence. Now, it's way better today than it was 10 years ago, but we can still do more. But yeah, if anything, WWE was last in the queue. That ain't great when you're the market leader. Number 3, WWF to WWE was a philosophical shift. I cannot believe we are talking about this, but my gosh, does it show what nonsense we can throw out there. But if you did watch the Ruthless Aggression era on the WWE Network that came out a few years ago, we were told the reason that Vince McMahon changed the WWF to WWE is because he wanted to create a brand new driving force for the entire company. Listen, I don't want to be horrible, but that is a total non-truth. Because back in 2002, the reason we had to get the F out is because the World Wildlife Fund felt like the World Wrestling Federation had ignored the agreement they'd had in place for years, mostly because Vince McMahon went and registered WWF.com, and that was something the Panda people didn't want him to do. Now, they were totally right in this when you did go through the deal the companies had struck years and years ago, but McMahon basically decided, well, I don't care, and what the flub are they going to do to me? Well, they took him to court, they won, and that's why we had to change the entire name, and believe you me, for a good old while people hated this because you just can't say the WWE. It doesn't make any sense. The WWF did make sense because it's the World Wrestling Federation, but if you say the WWE, it means the World Wrestling Entertainment, and you sound like you're an alien from Mars. But do not let anybody tell you otherwise. This was done because a lawyer told Vince McMahon he was in breach of an agreement, and he was, and he paid the price. That's about the end of it. Number 2, ruthless aggression was an era. Or was it just a little bit of marketing because Vince McMahon saw how good the Attitude Era had done and he wanted to carry it on? I don't think it lasts all that long either. You can probably put it between the years 2002 and 2008, because soon after that the WWE did strike their deal with Mattel and realized they could get more advertisers if they turned into a PG company, so they did. All of a sudden, no more swearing and no more flubbed up storylines. Vince McMahon even came out on Raw one day with the entire roster around the ring and just started saying over and over again, who is going to show me ruthless aggression? And of course, we sent John Cena out to confront Kurt Angle during his debut. And what did he say to the Olympic gold medalist? I've got ruthless aggression. Nobody was doing that in the Attitude Era. Steve Austin didn't confront The Rock and be like, oh, hey son, it's Attitude Era time. Because all we were doing was trying to rebrand this in the hope that people would tune back in. And I suppose it worked a little bit, but really we had just hit our first drop, and wrestling is cyclical. It was going to take about a decade before it picked up again. If you do watch the television around this time as well, there are weeks and weeks where this concept is pushed hard, and then everybody stops talking about it when they realized it hasn't worked, that business is sagging. So of course we use it today to define a period, but in terms of it actually being a thing, well, we kind of made it up. Number 1, Vince McMahon made pro wrestling huge. Now he did make WWE huge and forever changed the trajectory of professional wrestling, and for that we do have to give him a lot of credit. Like, would I be watching it in the guise I am now without Vince McMahon? The argument is probably not. But you cannot pretend that he was the guy that came along and took wrestling out of these small smoky buildings or bars, because you can go to many a territory that was alive in the USA in the 70s and 80s and see them pull huge houses. And no, they wouldn't be comparable to what WrestleMania would go on to do, but they were still pretty damn massive. A lot of them had incredible production values. A name we can always throw in there is Jim Londos, because during the early 1900s, most people described him as a mega draw, and not like anything the business had seen until Hulk Hogan arrived in the 1980s. I mean, back in the 1930s, Londos was Madison Square Garden's first ever major drawing card, routinely pulling in 20,000 people to the world's most famous arena. In 1933, Jim also visited his home nation of Greece to see his father, and he drew 70,000 people to a stadium for a match against Kola Kurane. The rumor was there was an extra 20,000 more people outside of the venue because they just wanted to be part of the magic. Listen, these are numbers that people would die for. He also broke US attendance and box office records when he took on long-standing rival Edge Strangler Lewis, which had a gate of $96,000. If we do use one of those inflation machines for 2025, that would be around about $2 million today. That's pretty amazing. So you can't take away what Vince McMahon did do, because he did revolutionize the game, but to act like he made sports entertainment popular, he did not. Though he did come up with sports entertainment, which is still a stupid name. That's why I use it, my friends. It makes me laugh. Know any other misconceptions that people have about WWE? Just drop us a comment below and let us know before you like the video, share the video, and subscribe. But otherwise, please take care, my friends. I appreciate you, and I will talk to you again on the next one.